Tell me, what do you think of the new dispersity-infused comics of this current era's reboot of comics? Because I think they fucking suck. What? You want more of an answer than a short, sweet, and to the point? Okay. However, I am warning you, you are not going to like it. Nevertheless, think about it, everyone. A black Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, a female Thor with terminal cancer, a female Deadpool, and America, a time-traveling black lesbian superhero from another planet, from another dimension, and etc. For me, I think these new comic book heroes from Marvel's pseudo-reboot fucking suck, and then some. Except for Black Spider-Man and Spider-Gwen. They're okay, and most definitely Gwenpool, because I think she is as funny as Deadpool. But I am probably getting way ahead of myself here, because you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. So here is a history lesson from me to you. For a better understanding of this topic related to comics, I recommend checking out Bob Chipman's video on the topic of timelines in comic books universes called Secret Crises on his show The Big Picture on the Escapist channel. And a link to it will be down below. However, I also like to mention that in that video, the discussion on the topic is a few years old. And not everything Bob says in the video is as black and white as he thinks it is. Everything in this day and age is more 50 Shades of Grey than actually black and white. Several years ago, before the two Marvel Civil War comic series came into existence, that also gave us new superheroes that fucking suck, before Marvel was taken over by the feminazis and their social justice troll slaves, and even before the cultural civil war called Gamergate, that's been going on for nearly 10 years now, the comic industries will have these certain events where they release special comics that will more or less reboot certain comic series and or the universes that the comics exist in. Crisis on Infinite Earths and Marvel Comics Secret Wars / Civil Wars are perfect examples of this. Timelines in comics are extremely strange, odd, and weird, and none of the above at the same time as well. But nonetheless, it is a much-needed lesser of two evils to choose from. Apart from what decade it is, the answer is usually not very much unless the story says otherwise. Nevertheless, sometimes it does if you want my honest opinion. Batman stories, for example, usually last a few days but are always stretched to 6 issues or more. Nevertheless, when he runs into Superman, it does not always mean that Superman's comics are running on the same extremely odd timelines like so much else in American comics. And managing the timelines is based on the mutual I won't bring it up if you don't bring it up agreements between the readers and the writers, which I've always considered a lazy as hell dick move on the writer's part. Eventually, those same I won't bring it up if you don't bring it up agreements between the reader and the writers will always result in contradictions, paradoxes, and long-term temporal issues when it comes to the characters who live active and very complex interconnected lives in those universes. But strangely, they aren't really allowed to age piles up, and you have to deal with them via the usual big sweeping and convoluted gestures that also winds up more or less fixing the problems that are broken. In other ways, i.e., if you're going to do some spring cleaning, you might as well use a vacuum if you're going to move all the furniture around anyways. And existentially, for people like me, this is made more complicated because existentially, some of us have back problems so we can't move any heavy furniture by ourselves, and none of the vacuums we use don't seem to want to work correctly. And that especially includes me as well. For DC Comics, it's Crisis on Infinite Earths, or the Crisis series for short, are a succession of crossover events I mentioned about at an early point in this video that aims to simplify and improves DC comic universes at various points by destroying it in a way that eliminates anything the current editorial boards don't like and rebuilding it in a way as to preserve and or revives what the current editorial boards do like. However, if you want my honest opinion, it is not always a good thing. Usually, time itself is not a big problem and or a factor in these regards. DC's has so many fictional cities, countries, and etc. Its heroes very rarely get wrapped up in a real-world problems. In the instances when they do, well, which is pretty rare, DC kinda stops talking about it, which I consider a serious cop-out. Marvel tends to work very differently. When the modern Marvel Universe began in the 60s, the editorial board's mandates wasn't just to maintain solid continuity with other comics, but also with the real world, to reference popular cultures, ties storylines to real events, and the whole shebang. Fucking hell, everyone, the characters even get to age. Some of them. Kind of. Peter Parker, for example, went from high school to graduate from college to get married to Mary Jane and have a daughter that has spider powers herself, while Tony Stark just kept building new Iron Man power armors and etc. But as years wore on and time stretched to its limits, Marvel's decided to, more or less, quietly adopt a more quote-unquote sliding scale approach to it. Which, if you want my opinion, only complicates things like hell for people like me. But basically, from the late 70s onwards, all Marvel stories are more or less presumed to be taking place in the more or less immediate present. And everything that happened in all the comics, from the first appearance of the Fantastic Four and onwards, still happens, but not over the period of 50 years or so. Instead, it's been more like 5 to 10 years within the Marvel's universe, more or less. Always a few years, never really that long, and that is how it always has been, more or less. But if you want my honest opinion, I think it also complicates things like hell too. For a few examples, what time is it in the Marvel universe? Right now. So when did Galactus' daughter Galacta first appear? A few years ago. When did the Dark Phoenix return? A few years ago. When did the first Marvel Civil War happen? A few years ago. When did the second Marvel Civil War happen? A few years after the first one. When did Hydra's Secret Empire happen? A few years after the second Marvel Civil War. All that ever changes are the era-specific details, like how Tony Stark originally got his heart injury in Vietnam, and now he got the injury at Afghanistan instead. And we pretend the other stories about previous military conflicts were either within Iraq or Afghanistan instead of what they originally were. And I find that a total pain in the ass because it makes things harder for people like me to collect and organize those comics that keep rebooting, because those comics are increasingly harder to find. Now, the only exception to all this is Captain America, and that's because he fought in World War II. That does not need to change because Marvel just keeps changing the amount of time he was frozen longer and longer. Now, when did he get thawed out? A few years ago. Nevertheless, if you want my honest opinion, it makes things so goddamn harder and convoluted to the point it makes it impossible for people like me to enjoy these series, because Captain America is such an outdated character because of his outdated mannerisms, his politics, or his religious mindset, because when it comes to him, it's hard work beats talent because talent doesn't work hard. However, in this day and age of ours, talent beats hard work because hard work doesn't have any talent, if you catch my drift. What it more or less means is that Marvel's never really needs a crisis-style event/reboot to fix these continuity issues, or as Bob Shipman would say, it's self-correcting, sort of. And if you want my opinion, I disagree with Bob Shipman here, and I think we need a reboot from Marvel. Therefore, I am asking the same question, just as Bob Shipman did in his video. Why are they doing it now in this day and age of contradictions, stereotypes, hypocrites, procrastinators, superficial scumbaggeries, shallowness, and logical and reasonable/existential paradoxes in such a fucking sloppy, haphazard manner? Well, an overly complicated part of it is, specifically if you have been following some of the big events in comics for the last 10 years, is the quote-unquote forced diversity and political correctness in our comics. How bad the quality of the stories and the artwork in the comics, and how dramatic and bad the movies have become in the last 4 years. The last time there was an epic shakeup like this, it was the getting rid of/integrating of the Ultimate Marvel Universe, which no longer serves a purpose but to make things easier to digest. Versions of classic characters for new audiences are now simply known as the movie versions of Marvel characters. To tell you the truth, I am not a big fan of the movie versions of the Marvel and DC characters because those movies are becoming too dramatic and soap opera-ish, and if you don't believe me, go check out the latest Thor movie. It's total shit, and if you still don't believe me, go check out this Honorable Wolf's review of the movie, and a link to it will be down below. No, the only exception to all this disaster is the Deadpool and the Guardian of the Galaxy movie, if you want my honest opinion. But look for the aftermath of the Secret Wars that involves bringing over and making official the good Ultimate Universe's ideas, like Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, Gwenpool, Luke Cage, the Punisher, and maybe... I think those 5 or so are it, to my knowledge. And don't even fucking think about adding any Nick Furies to this list either. The white one is a fucking asshole. His illegitimate black son, who goes by the same name, is a fucking asshole. And Samuel L. Jackson, who plays the live-action black Nick Fury, is an even bigger fucking asshole than these 2 Nick Furies put together. Moreover, I fucking hate S.H.I.E.L.D. It is just another way of saying the CIA, and I fucking hate the CIA. To me, this is probably one out of too many big unspoken questions of why to do reboots to bring the Marvel universes and the ludicrously profitable Marvel Cinematic Universe into greater alignments, which has not necessarily to make the comics more palatable to any new movie fans. And I highly doubt anyone in the publishing seriously thinks that many people will come out of the Avengers movies or any other Marvel's movies and will think, wow, that was great. You know what we should do now? Go to a very inconveniently located, poorly laid out store and buy overpriced comics of the much more and overly confusing versions of what we just saw. What do they think we are? Fucking stupid? No, I imagine their ideas are to reshape the comics to serve as idea experiments for future movies and or TV shows, which they did by pumping up the importance of the characters like Iron Man, whose movies I love, or the Inhumans, whose TV series have failed epically, the Guardians of the Galaxy, whose movies I love, but the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series is fucking boring as hell. Netflix version of Iron Fist is fucking horrible. Captain America's movies are okay. The Hulk's movies and original live-action TV series I fucking love. Netflix version of the Punisher TV series as well as all his movies, which I fucking love. Netflix version of Luke Cage, which I think is slow but okay. Netflix version of Defenders is fucking horrible, and etc. Now, in this current new reboot of Marvel lore, while significantly downgrading the universe's wide importance and qualities, I am really not very sure what to think of all of this epic disaster in the comic industry. I don't know if it bothers me in a practical sense or at an existential level. For me, I think the Marvel universe will end up less and less functional per movie, TV series, cartoon, anime, video game, and especially with its comics. Just like what's happening to DC with its movies, TV series, cartoons, animes, video games, but strangely, not with its comics. Now, you are probably asking me, what's your point, FK, and what am I overlooking? My point is that the comic book industries are going through highly unusual and highly stupid changes. I don't know where it started, I don't know how it started, and I don't know when it started. Nevertheless, the changes are still continuing, and that resulted in a ton of fucking stupid things being done to the comics we love. For example, removing comics from grocery stores, gas stations, magazine stands, and etc., then focusing on selling them more in comic-focused hobby shops, allowing no talent-crazy hacks in charge of making comics that fucking suck very badly. In addition to Marvel as a whole starting to care less and less about the comics, but more on making money on movies and TV shows because of corporate capitalist pigs and women like Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, and Zoe Quinn. And now, in this day and age for the last 8 years, Marvel is now more focused on pandering to those quote-unquote social justice warriors and feminists. Sadly, a very large number of those SJWs are nothing more than fucking trolls, and the so-called feminists are nothing more than a violent, weaponized version dubbed third-wave feminism. But for many others like me, they're always going to be fucking feminazi. Now, who is to blame for this? To give you my honest opinion, it is hard to tell. There are way too many people, groups, and factions to point out. Nevertheless, I blame the Republican capitalist pigs because there's always a Republican exploiting controversies like this for money. The stupid Tea Party liberals because they're both sides of the same coin. The religious nuts because they think comics are gateways to the devil. The fucking feminazis like Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, and Brianna Wu who took advantage of the chinks in the armor in the entertainment industries for fame and money. And most of all, the social justice trolls trolls who are the last hair that broke the camel's back and are causing the massive damage to the entertainment industry and our culture. It's all their fault for why we are seeing such massive social justice extremist and feminazi infestation inside of Marvel Comics. It is why Marvel is always allowing those fucking stupid so-called feminists writing horrible stories, drawing horrible drawings for comics. However, and everyone, please listen to me. A black Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, a female Deadpool, Miss Marvel, and etc. They sound like good ideas for the next generation of comic book readers. However, you have to do it in small moderations. Over time, not all at once like Marvel did to satisfy the ugly, crazy fuckers who call themselves feminists. In addition, it is rather ironic that the Marvel Universe was functionable in the first place was because of its charm, and not because of its diversity quotas and political correctness propaganda. DC Comics was made sure to keep diversity and political correctness out of their comics, or at least do it in small moderations that makes their comics fucking awesome. Nevertheless, it is also rather ironic that all the DC movies are fucking horrible, and when it comes to the Dark Horse comics, fucking hell, people! They practically never reboot their comics, and they never allow the SJWs and feminazis in their company. That is why everyone fucking loves their comics, and I am saying that because I am a self-proclaimed SJW who's pro-Gamergate and pro-Comicgate. Will these still be the cases in the unforeseen future for Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse? Time will tell. Well, I try to hope so. I am Fortkavanagh, and this is The Honest Picture. Like, subscribe, and share this video, would you kindly?